Think I'm live. Think I did it. Did I do it? I can't hear anything. It's okay. I don't need to hear anything. I haven't talked about anything. Today on WebdriverIO Wednesday, this is the first attempt at this, I want to just cover the basics of installing WebdriverIO and writing a couple tests just to see what that looks like. So if you're familiar with WebdriverIO, this shouldn't really be anything new, but if you don't know what WebdriverIO is, or you've heard about it and you want to learn more about it, that's what today's stream is going to be. So hopefully it won't take more than 45 minutes or so, because I've got something to do at 1, so it can't take that long. I'm on Central Time, Central Standard. I live in San Antonio. I'm Kevin Lamping, by the way. I should mention that as well. And I've been into WebdriverIO for about a year now, and it's a really cool little library that does neat things like test websites. And I think that's really great as a front-end developer to be able to write test automation in JavaScript. So that's pretty cool. Let's go ahead and try running this example and see how it goes. So I'm just going to copy this, and then I'm going to go to my editor and paste it in. I need to go ahead, make that size a little bit larger in case you want to see that. I'll set it to JavaScript. And then the other thing I want to do is, before I do all of that, is create a new folder. So I'm going to make a directory called WebdriverIO web sample. Sure. Go into that. Okay, so in here I'm going to initialize NPM. And I can do this through NPM init. I've got Node installed. I'm using 5.5 right now. I think if you've got anything above 4.0, it should work. Just a second. I've got a chat open somewhere. I just want to make sure. There's the chat. There it is. Okay, so I've got chat open as well. So if you want to chat anything, ask questions, or clarify what I've gotten wrong, please do. I'm sure I'm going to get a few things wrong here. So anyway, I've used Node, and I'm going to use NPM. I'm on 3.3 right now. I don't think it matters too much whether you're on 2 or 3 on your NPM version, but that's what I use. So I'm going to initialize a NPM file. I can do this and accept all the defaults by just doing -y, and that just initializes a basic NPM module for you, or you can come in here and use the command line tool. So we'll keep it the name. We'll keep it 1.0 sample tests, something dumb. Our entry point index.js, sure, we'll leave it there. Our command is going to be WDIO. That's the WebdriverIO command that we can run. So this is going to add something to our NPM scripts, and we'll get into that in a minute. We don't have a Git repository yet. I'll probably add that later, and I don't worry about keywords. I don't care about the author, and sure, all that's good. So I basically could have said npm init-y, and it would have done pretty much all of this. The only thing is that we wouldn't have had that scripts there to add. If I open this up, you can see here is our basic package JSON file with our scripts that does a test and runs the WebdriverIO command through the command line runner. So if I were to run that right now, so npm test, you see it's going to throw an error because WebdriverIO, the command isn't found. And so there's 2 ways that we can install WebdriverIO. One way is through, let's see if we have it on here. They've got some great development guides, so that's really awesome. You can just install it globally if you'd want it to, but we want to install it locally. So we can run our install and give that a minute to run. I used to install modules globally because it made it really easy to run it from the command line. You would just type that, like WebdriverIO has a test runner built in that you can use. It's really cool. And you could just pass in WDIO from the command line. And I'm going to try that in just a second, and it's going to tell me that it can't find the module. So here, let's try that. Command not found WDIO. And that's because I didn't install it globally. So instead, what we have in the docs is a reference to the Node modules folder. So I can jump into Node modules and into the bin folder and take a look at that, and you see here we have our command of WebdriverIO. So we could pass it in by running, referencing the full path. But what's really neat about our NPM scripts is that anything in here, it basically acts like that. It looks in that bin folder for command line runners. So I think what it does behind the scenes is add it to the path variable. So path being, let's see if I can do this. Yeah, so I've got like this whole path thing. I don't even know if that's right or not, but it adds it to that path variable so that you don't have to specify it yourself. So if I ran npm test, it's going to run WDIO for me, which is super cool. And let's go ahead and the first thing that WebDriver does is creates a configuration file for you. So I basically just ran the config statement. The first when you run this command, it will check for a configuration file. If it finds it, it'll use that configuration file. Otherwise, it will help you generate one. So what we're going to do is try and generate one. So jump back to the command line. I'm going to test this on my local machine, and I'm going to use Milka. I like Milka, and I would like it to install the framework adapter for me. We'll just have these in the test folder. So /test/star.js. So that's going to look at anything inside the test folder. Don't put it in your root folder. I made this mistake the other day of having my test live right next to my configuration file, and since they both end in JS, WebdriverIO was actually trying to execute the configuration file, which in turn actually tried to start some another WebdriverIO Selenium server. It was kind of a mess, and it was one of those dumb little mistakes that you end up making because you kind of rush through the setup and everything. So make sure at least those two are separate, or you can exclude certain files to run. So you could exclude your configuration file if you wanted to. Anyway, I just like keeping it in a separate folder. So the reporter I want to use, you can space to select any reporter that you want to use, or you could just go with none. I'll use actually spec. I like spec. And you can do multiple if you like as well, which can be really helpful if you want to, if you're on a continuous integration or like a CI/CD server, and you want to see both the human readable spec format and then like a JUnit format to get sent to a JUnit processor to like record results and stuff. So it's really neat to have multiple reporters. This is something new in 4.0 that wasn't there in 3.0, and one of those things that I was like, oh man, I wish I could do multiple reporters, and then I see that it's in 4.0 and I do a little dance because it's super awesome. So we also want it to install for us. And why is somebody calling me? Okay. Sorry, interruptions. I do want to add the Selenium Standalone service, which is pretty awesome. Selenium, since I'm testing this on my local machine, I need to have a Selenium server running in order to test it. And it was actually pretty simple to do using this NPM module called Selenium Standalone. And it's gotten even simpler with this service now. It does all that stuff in the background for you. So that's super awesome. And yeah, we want it installed. I'm going to go with, let's just go with command for logging verbosity. That's going to output all the commands we run. And we'll keep the error shots as that. We will test, let's test a live site. Let's see, what site do we want to test? Let's test the WebdriverIO site. That's a good one to test. Let me make sure that it's HTTP. Okay, so it's going to run the install and everything. And while it does that, I'm going to check and see who messaged or who called me and make sure that it's nothing terrible. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Okay, so we've created a new configuration file. Let's jump into that. And this has got all our stuff. So here's where we defined that we wanted our test in this specific folder. Let's go ahead and create that folder. And then anything that you wanted to exclude, so say we wanted to exclude our configuration file, we would just type that. Or we can do specifically any sort of glob pattern. Globs are specifically around this type of stuff. This is something they use in like Gulp and Grunt to match files. So if you're familiar with those, you'd be familiar with this. So glob, that's G-L-O-B. And I apologize if any of this is unclear. I've got a little bit of a head cold right now. Hopefully getting over it. But yeah, we'll just leave this blank for now. We don't need to exclude anything in there. Some capabilities, we're going to test this in Firefox. Here's our log level that we set. There's some other things. If you're having some issues with logging in Jenkins, like the output is got all these weird characters, you can set that to false and it'll get rid of those characters. Here's the URL we're going to test for. A lot of stuff that we can get into that I don't really want to touch on right now. But here's our Selenium standalone service. We're using Mocha because that's what I'm familiar with. It automatically set us up to use the BDD UI, but we could change this to the TDD if we wanted to, which is, if you're familiar with Mocha, you'll get what that is. If not, you don't need to worry about it. And then a whole bunch of hooks that we might get into some other time. So I'll just save that. And then the other thing I need to do is, let's see, so actually, I had set that as WebdriverIO. That's the basic. But this is a bad example. So I'm gonna undo that. Go back home. So there's two things. This one you run through a node script. So you'd say node and then the file test/test.js. And because it's run through a node script, you have to manually load WebdriverIO in order for it to run and everything. So that's why you see things like require WebdriverIO, and you set your desired capabilities up here, and then you have to get your WebdriverIO client and initialize it and pass in the URL and all that kind of stuff. So that's really nice for really simple setup, but what that doesn't include is the ability to get that Selenium standalone service in place and things like that. So I like to go with the test runner just because it's got a lot of functionality to it. So here we can actually take this example and use that for what we want. So let's see. I didn't undo anything. Why is that red? Question mark. I don't know. Oh, I guess it can't find the end. That's what it is. Okay. So I want to test the WebdriverIO page. It should have the right title. Instead of passing in this full URL, I'm just going to pass in a slash. The other thing to do is check and see. Okay, so you don't need a slash at here. Your slash gets appended, or appended at here. So it's going to go. It's going to open up a Firefox window because that's what we defined it to do. We said use Firefox. And it's going to load our base URL, it's going to get the title, and then it's going to do an assertion that that the title matches. So I'll save this to where is it? You can see all of my wonderful things to test and homepage. Okay, now I've got this homepage and I'm going to just run npm test and let's see if it works or not, or if I mess something up. So this is going to start a Selenium server for me and hopefully run. Okay, so it says it couldn't connect to the Selenium server. I did something wrong. What is it? So here's the part where the live coding exercise kind of grinds to a halt because I didn't do something right. We got a browser. We said we wanted Selenium standalone. I don't know. I haven't actually used this service yet. So maybe there's something with that I didn't get configured perfectly. So what I'm going to do is show you how easy it is to install the Selenium server on your own. Selenium standalone. So I just saved that. And in the chat room right now, Luke is saying that they've had trouble with Selenium Standalone and the corporate proxy. I'm not too surprised to hear that. You may need to run the Java jar file on your own because, you know, there's always these weird cases that cause trouble because of you're just doomed to have weird edge cases that you kind of get into that just it's difficult to test for, and so you kind of have to do things your own way. Actually, getting the standalone jar isn't too difficult. It's a little tricky if you're trying to do it across a bunch of different machines out there, like you have a bunch of coworkers who want to try it as well, and it can get kind of messy if the different Java versions are installed, and you also have to have your browser drivers installed as well, so like Firefox and Chrome driver and IE driver and things like that. So getting all that installed and everything can be a little bit of a mess. If you do have to go that way and you're able to, I'd highly recommend using a cloud Selenium service like Sauce Labs or BrowserStack or TestingBot. All of those are integrated pretty well into WebdriverIO, and they work really well, and there's lots of free trials as well. So yeah, I've got Selenium Standalone installed. I can run this by doing my node modules bin Selenium Standalone. And I could actually create my own command here if I wanted to. I'm not going to worry about that right now. The first thing I need to do is set it up. No, I need to install. So this is going to install all the various things for me. So you see here's the jar that it's grabbing from the Selenium Standalone server, or Selenium Standalone package. And then my Chrome driver and Gecko driver for Firefox and things like that. So it's installed now. Now I'm going to run start, and I will have Selenium running. So now I've got a Selenium server running, which I just think is the coolest thing to be able to install it that quickly, because it used to be a real pain. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and take that service out of here. Yeah, I'll just comment that line out. I don't want to mess with that for now. I'll probably jump back into that another time because it's too cool of a feature to skip over. But I didn't want me to spend the entirety of this demo just talking through or thinking about what I did wrong. So let's try it testing again and see what we can do. Okay, so let's see, it's on the wrong screen. Okay, I got it to show up. Got it to show up just in time. Sometimes I've got multiple monitors right now, so it pops up on different screens. I don't know if there's a way to control that. If anybody knows if there's a way to control which one is to, what was I going to say? If there's a way to control which screen the browser pops up on, you know, it might have to do with your title bar and like what your main display is, because that's probably what it has to do with. So, oh well. You can see here it ran my command and it validated that the title was correct. Here's the output from Selenium. So here are the different commands I ran. What's neat about WebdriverIO is that it doesn't actually implement much of Selenium. All it does is talk to that Selenium server for you through REST API calls. So here I get a session ID. So WebdriverIO sends a command to Selenium, sends a post method or HTTP post to Selenium at this endpoint, and Selenium will start a new session and return an ID. And so now it's got that ID of the browser for us, and we can use that to call other commands. So here I'm going to call the URL command, and it's going to be a post, and it's going to pass in the WebdriverIO URL. That's going to tell the server to run that, or to go to that URL. And then we're going to do a GET request to get the title of the page. That's going to return the title. And then at the very end, it deletes the session for us. So that's something that WebdriverIO does. And that's actually new to 4.0, is the fact that at the beginning you used to have to do something like a before. and then you have to do browser.init. You used to have to do that, and then the same thing in like an after you do browser.end. You used to have to do that. Now you don't. WebdriverIO 4.0 takes care of that for you. I'm gonna look in the chat messages real quick and grab a drink of water. Cool. So yeah, that's the basics of it. Let's do something a little bit more complicated. So I want to go to the API page, and so I'm going to want to click this button or click this link, and then from there I'm going to do a search for a command and output that the command worked. So to get to this API page, I need to click this link. Now there's a couple different ways to do it, and if we jump into the usage section, you see there's this selectors page. This is a great page to see how we can select elements on the page. And this is just normal CSS selector. This is built into Selenium itself, which is pretty cool that they have support for this, because normally it would be something like XPath that you'd need to use, which for me as a front-end developer, this is just a shift in mindset that I'd have to figure out how to write XPath, and I don't know, I'd have trouble with it. So being able to just use plain CSS selectors is super cool and something that I love about the tool. And it's not specific to WebdriverIO, it's just part of the Selenium suite nowadays, which is awesome. The other thing is that you can check partial link text. So I believe this might actually be part of WebdriverIO, the ability to get partial link text. I could be wrong about that, and I hope I'm corrected if I'm wrong. But we're going to use that. And so instead of passing in like an ID or something for our API, we're going to do, so we're going to assert the title. We're going to say it should have a link to the API page. Live coding. Okay. So I'm trying to think. We'll go back to. We'll reload the base URL, and then we'll do browser dot is existing, and we'll pass in the selector that we want to check, which is link text equals API. So this is going to search the page for any link on the home page that has the text of API. So if I search for API, you can see here there's actually an API version link. So it might check that if we were using the partial selector, but since we're using the full text selector, it has to match that. It's only going to choose this link. So that's pretty cool. That's a neat way of getting an element without having to know too much about the underlying HTML. I opened up the developer console because I wanted to show you if you did want to go another route, we could use this this attribute using an attribute selector. So instead of that, oh man. There. I was forgetting my Sublime text commands. I can pass in a basic element or attribute selector. So I would check that it's API.html. And since that's the value of the href attribute, it should match it. So I could also do that if I wanted to, but I don't want to, so I'll do this. Is existing is going to return a value, a Boolean value. That's whether it's true or false, whether it's existing. So we'll do something like variable has API, and then we'll do an assert. Actually, I don't even have to do OK. I can just say has API link. And let's give this a shot. I haven't ever tried this, but I'm going to see. Oops. is it going? And it did a whole bunch of stuff. And let's see. Oh, it worked. I'm amazed. Really, really surprised that worked, but I think that's good. I could validate that it would break by changing this text. So if I did something like that and ran it again, let's see. Here it's running. Oops. Doing a whole bunch of stuff, waiting for the page to load. Selenium will go ahead and wait for the page to load for you, which is really cool. You don't have to worry about that too much. If you do have something like a single page app, like Angular or React, you might need to add a little bit more custom functionality there to make sure that the page is fully loaded, especially if you're dynamically loading things. So do watch out for that. But you can see that false should not equal true because our link didn't exist. That's pretty cool. But that's not what we wanted to do. We wanted to click the link. So let's just copy and paste this. I don't want to delete the code because I'm going to share this code at the end. And in case you're interested in running through it yourself. So I will click the API link, and then now I'll do basically what I did before. I'll get the title of the page and assert that it's the new title. So let's figure out what that new title is. Here, API. It is API docs. Cool. So we'll assert that. And then, so should take. Yeah. There's a bunch of different ways that you can organize your text or your test if you wanted to, so that you're not having to do browser URL every time, so that you don't have to keep these separate. You probably want to create these as a subsuite. So you do something like describe API page, and then from there you would move your stuff into here. Should have a link to the home page, and then something like that. So you could you can do that. I didn't want to get too much into the structure right now, just because it can get kind of hairy and messy, and there's always different ways of doing that. So I'm going to go ahead and skip this test because I don't want to waste time on it. So I'll skip that. And I'd actually let's just skip both of these because we don't really need to do both. And I could put .skip. That's a Mocha language that will pass over a test and not run it. Or you can say .only. And what .only is going to do is say only run this test. So that's pretty cool. A nice way to save time when you're writing your test. So here I'll run npm test. And let that run. And let's see if I can show you. Should take us, yeah, so it clicked the link and now it took us to that API page, which is super cool. And let's see if the title passed just perfectly. Okay, so that page popped up pretty quickly and our test was done pretty quickly. So it didn't really give us time to look around the page and see everything was working well. So one thing that we could do is this debug command. And what debug is going to do is it's going to pause the execution state until you're ready to go again. That's pretty cool. There's also a pause command as well, and I can show you these. So debug here, look at debug, and then pause. The difference between debug and pause is just going to wait for a specific amount of time and then continue executing. Debug is going to wait until you press the enter key in your command line, and then it'll go going again. So let's try pause for 2 seconds. So this is in milliseconds. We're going to try that. Run it, and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so it kind of paused there for 2 seconds and then stopped. So that's pause. Let's try debug. Okay, so you see it says that the queue has stopped. Now you can go into the browser. So here we are. What happened? Oh, that's right. There's a timeout setting of 10 seconds. And I was just notified in chat, don't forget your timeout. And I'm glad I forgot the timeout because it's I kind of learn it the hard way and you don't forget it. So this, not there, Mocha has a built-in timeout of 2 seconds. WebdriverIO ups that to 10 seconds. And we need to up that to that many seconds, however many that is. Don't go too high because then it actually will close immediately. It'll time out immediately because the number is just too high and it can't handle it. So I think 8 nines is about what you want for your timeout. And so let's try that now. Up. Okay, so now it's stopped. Now we can go into our page. So if I wanted to inspect the page, I can inspect it. I can see this is my input area. So I've got a name of search. So I'll probably want to reference the selector. And then I'll type something in it and make sure that things are going on in here if I wanted to. I could do that. I could also do the the text selector of just doing debug. That would also find the debug link for me, which is somewhere in here on this list. I could do that and other things. So I think what I want to try is, let's just try searching and then taking a screenshot of the page, just to kind of hint at some visual regression testing that we can do. We won't cover it now. I'm probably going to wrap this up in the next few minutes, but I did want to kind of tease at it. So I've got my timeout set up really high with my debug. I'm going to change that back. I'm just going to get rid of that because I don't want my timeout going forever, because timeouts are actually a pretty good thing if your test gets stuck trying to find an element or something like that, or something goes wrong. You want your timeout to finish so you're not waiting forever for your test to end when it's not going to end. So, okay, I'm done with this. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and you see it closed down everything for me, and everything still passed like I wanted it to. So I'll go back to my test. I got rid of my debug, and what I'm going to do is type a command into that search section. So now I'm going to be in the API page, should filter search results. Okay, so what's different about this one is I'm not going to click on this link. I'm just going to go straight to the API page. So I'll do API HTML. This is going to get appended to the URL, which is pretty cool. You don't have to type in WebdriverIO here. You just do whatever the path is. I'm not going to worry about the title, but I am going to set the text. So to do that, let's jump back into here. I want a set text, or not set text, set value. That's what I want. And I have my set value command. I'm going to pass in the selector and the value that I want to set. So here we have an input value and the value we want. So, and we can also do that to get the value of an input as well if we wanted to. But I don't want to. Browser.setValue. And then I'll pass in the selector of name equals search. So again, a attribute selector. And then the value will be debug. Okay, so I'll set that value, and then what I will do is I will take a screenshot of the page. So that's just screenshot, I believe. Let me double check, because it might be take screenshot. Oh, there is a screenshot, but that's not what you want to use. You want to use save screenshot, because save screenshot is the more functional one. And then we'll pass this in as API with results. PNG. Okay, let's see if this works. It looked like it did. I'm going to go ahead and open API with result. And here's the screenshot of the page that it took. So super cool. Here's the text that got inputted and the updated menu. We haven't clicked on it yet, so the main docs are still there. I could also come in here and like click this X to make sure that it clears the value, things like that. So one thing that we could do with this is there's a tool called WebdriverCSS that's pretty neat for using comparing screenshots, and instead of taking screenshots of the entire page, it'll take screenshots of specific elements. That's a really neat tool out there. There's also, I've been messing around with something called Spectre. Let's see, we are Friday, put that together. And it's basically a way to do screenshot comparisons. I'm still trying to figure out how to upload it, but because this is just a Node file, I can do, like, say I load the, if you're familiar with Node, there's a request library that Node has. Then I can come in here and say request.post, and I post the URL. That to the, I guess, vrtservice.com, and then I pass in the data. So just a second. Pass in the screenshot that I want, and it would do that comparison for me. There's some neat tools out there. Applitools is one. Applitools Eyes. Mention that real quick. I want to do some work around figuring out how to get the integration in well with this tool. I still need to learn about that. But what I like about Applitools is that it's got really nice visual comparison algorithms. So it's pretty smart about the different things that it can be aware of, because if you think about like a page, any sort of page out there, there's all these dynamic stuff that's always changing and things like that. So yeah, I want to jump into that. There's also this tool like Spectre. There's other tools. There's Visual Review is another one that is similar to it. So I think, yeah, here you can see how it's kind of combining, looking at the different screenshots, and you can accept it and stuff like that. So very neat things out there to take a look at. So that's our script. Let me go ahead and run it one last time just to make sure that all of these tests work together. So this just pops up. Move that up. So here it's doing our test. See, it's running our commands. Here it ran the debug, and it took the screenshot, and everything passed. So looks like I didn't mess things up too terribly, and things are working pretty well. I'll be back again next week to jump into something else. I don't know what it'll be. Maybe it'll be something around screenshots or something like that. So thanks everybody for listening, and actually I'm going to hang out for just a second to see if there's any questions in the live chat on the YouTube page right now. So while I do that, I will post this up on a gist in GitHub and send the link out to that in just a second. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Yeah. Okay, there was one question about timeout in describe, if it can be used as well, and I'm pretty sure it can, but let's double check. Here's the gist. I will tweet this out or something. Actually, I'll paste it in the chat, and then I'll tweet it out as well. But let's try this out. So in Mocha, show you. That timeout option that I was mentioning is I was passing it in from the command line, but you can also pass it in Mocha through the suite level and test level. So let's see if we want to set that timeout specifically, and I'll do it just on here. Insert, and then at the very beginning of my test, I'm going to say this.timeout, and I'm going to change that to a really high number, and then I'll do my browser.debug, and let's run that. So it should hit the debug spot, and we're going to give it 10 seconds just to make sure. And I think it's working. That's been about 10 seconds. But while we wait for that, I'm going to add another debug just in this test, just to make sure that the timeout specified here doesn't impact the timeout specified in this test. And then, while I'm here, I'm just going to mention that you can also do describe.skip or describe.only. So that's helpful if you want to skip or do only specific describe blocks. So, okay, looks like that worked perfectly. So let's try this method, where the first debug should be fine. It should let us wait forever. And then the second debug should throw a timeout. So I'm just going to hit enter. We're going to move to the next one. So we did that URL. Okay, now we're at another debug. And this should take a few seconds. Yeah. So you see it kind of skipped through that, and it's going to tell me that I have a failing test. Yeah, test failed. But I had some issues with it because of this timeout. Yeah, it didn't complete. So yeah, that's timeouts. And I'll share the link to that in chat. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and wrap that up. I posted a link and everything in chat. Thanks everybody for joining me, and let's see how awkward I can make this as I stop the streaming. Oh no, it's not hard. I just pressed stop streaming. So thanks everybody.